Welcome to Hitting Home with Mike and Arif. And Mike, over the last several years, we've spent countless hours sharing with our audience, talking about home ownership, whether it's getting into the transaction, getting into home ownership to begin with, selling, buying, whatever it may be. Why? Because it's the greatest single investment that people will likely make. And one of those topics that we really need to cover, and we're doing it today.
Important one, and that is the home inspection. And who do we have here with us today that's going to talk us through all of the home inspection issues?
Mike, we've got a phenomenal guest, and I'm sure we're thrilled to introduce to our audience Phil von Kaufamn, who is a home inspector with an owner-operator of the Mike Homes Inspection brand. You're a home inspector serving Simcoe County and surrounding area. Phil, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
And I'm excited to talk to you today and to share with our audience some things that are sort of beyond sort of surface level or skin deep, get beyond what we can see with the naked eye. Yes. There's lots of ideas of what people think a home inspection is about, but I think we're both excited to explore with you some things that might not be so obvious that are vital. So we're glad to have you on the show.
Well, thanks very much for that great introduction.
Excellent.
Our pleasure.
And just to get things rolling here, tell us a little bit about what it is you do in your day-to-day and why that is so vital to the homeowner or pending homeowner, everything that you do in your day.
Like Arif said, I'm a approved home inspector, Simcoe County. I'm involved in all stages of home ownership. So I work for the client, which is the homeowner or prospective homeowner. So helping them buy it right, either prepare to sell it right, to own it right, or to protect it right. Yeah. So I'm in all those areas.
And we're going to touch on many of the issues that can occur with a home, be it a new home or at any point in the age of a home. And it's not always just, to correct me if I'm wrong, you're not just looking for a problem, you're looking for a scenario that could lead to a problem as well, to make that homeowner or pending homeowner aware.
Absolutely. I like to call ourselves defect recognition experts.
I like that. Yeah.
Okay, so
definitely.
So whether it's an apparent problem, most people are aware, but there could be issues that could lead to bigger problems.
And
I was going to say, it used to be that home inspectors sort of included on the report, and it became sort of a bit of a talking point. They're like, well, I'm paying all this money for a home inspector, but the home inspector's just going to do a once-over. I'm paying them good money. It feels like it's just money that I have to spend, whether you want to call it a cash grab or whatever it is, because somewhere in there it's just going to say, I can only see what the eyes can see. And you can't hold me to anything beyond that. So kind of what's the point? Why can't I get my cousin Vinny to come in? He's a framer, he's a bricklayer, he knows homes just as well. Why do I need a home inspector? What's changed over the last several years in your industry, and why the change?
Well, I think, not speaking for Vinny, the home inspector, but I'm a general practitioner. Okay, so think about your doctor is a GP. And if they diagnose an issue, they refer you to a specialist. So I'm not an electrician, I'm not a plumber. I'm a defect recognition expert. So in my toolbox, though, I have, and I think we're going to get into that in the future, but I have a number of tools that I can use to kind of see behind the curtains as well, help me diagnose if there's any issues.
And some of those things that you are diagnosing, the red flags you're uncovering as you make your way from the very bottom of that foundation and beneath to the tip of the roof. What would you say it's percentage-wise, maybe it's not a fair question, but how much of the problem is a problem that, let's say, is just due to wear and age of the home versus inadequate construction to begin with? And
that's a good question.
Primarily, maybe not primarily or predominantly, but oftentimes, it's that do-it-yourself basement thing where you've got unqualified people in the do. But it's not just limited to that. There's a lot of people who hang up a shingle and call themselves contractors who really don't have the skills to follow through. So where would you say the balance is that in your day-to-day that you're seeing? Where would that fall?
I think a lot of issues are because of maintenance that hasn't been carried out on a home.
Okay, so that's putting it back onto the homeowner.
Preventative, yeah. So obviously there's going to be some structural issues that crop up. What a homeowner doesn't want is a surprise.
No.
Right, especially if they're buying a house.
Yeah.
You know, everything's fixable, right? But if you're walking into a transaction of the most important transaction you're going to make in your life, you don't want a big surprise coming out of that. And most things can be prevented with home maintenance. Every house has issues. Every house.
Yeah.
Whether it's new, whether it's old, there's going to be things that are going to be having, being addressed. My home inspection report will outline mostly maintenance items. I'd say 90% of the inspection report is, like you said, it's that checkbox of getting through the maintenance items. But there's going to be those major things that could be leading to problems in the future.
So let's go into that just a little bit. I mean, you did say every single home has some form of challenge. If we think about the scenario, especially if you're looking at a new home, for example, actually that's not quite true, it would be with every home. Over a period of time, there's such a huge amount of weight on the footprint that is the home, that the home can go through settling, and during settling and frost and different climate changes, you could have some things impact the infrastructure of the house, the walls, the grout lines, the foundation, that kind of thing. What, if it's possible, is there kind of, like when you take your car, when you buy a car, inside your owner, your welcome package, there's like a schedule of maintenance of certain milestones and timelines that you should look at doing certain things. Give us an idea of what are some recommended things that might require you coming in versus also what the homeowner can do without you.
Or as a homeowner would lead to a successful home inspection result.
Right.
Close your home. Yeah.
So like you mentioned cracks. So every home has cracks, whether they're in the basement floor or the garage floor, the mortar in your brickwork, there's going to be cracks. Those things, if they're not, bigger than the width of a dime, are usually not a real major concern. They can be sealed. So repointing your mortar in your brickwork, for example, or using a product called Sigaflex to address the cracks in your basement floor, that type of thing. Also ventilation, right? Very important. So cleaning, the furnace filter, exchanging that. You've got a filter on your humidifier. You have filters on your duct work for your dryer, for example, the lint. Clean all that stuff out regularly, maintain that. If you have a heat recovery ventilator in your home, there's filters in there that need periodic cleaning and maintenance as well. So there's general maintenance that needs to be done. Can address a lot of issues like moisture in your home, and then the drainage around your foundation as well.
Yeah, that's within the living spaces. Is it just as important to have proper ventilation, say, within the garage or within the attic space, and why would that be?
Soffit and vents in your roof. Big important thing to have is the ventilation in your roof and the proper insulation as well.
What can happen? I mean, I've seen a lot of black mold scenarios over 22 years doing this, and more often than not, if they're not in the basement, it's in the attic. So what's happening there that's causing that black mold in people's attics?
Moisture in the attic. The vent on your bathroom fan, for example, can become disconnected. Right, and if that moist air is being vented into your attic, you're going to create a moisture issue.
Yeah.
Your soffit vents could be blocked.
Yeah.
Right, there could be insulation that's displaced, so that heat comes into your attic when it shouldn't be in the winter. So when condensation hits heat, or cold air hits heat, you're going to get condensation.
And
that could be a problem
you build
as
up
well.
a moisture. If you've got good ventilation, it's going to keep it.
So there are some.
Sorry, I just want to say there is those do-it-yourselfers who do their own, say, kitchen venting and bathroom venting straight into the attic, and it's putting the moisture right in there.
Yeah. And how often do you go up to your attic to check?
Yeah,
I've never been in my attic.
Never been in your attic.
Yeah, during the home inspection. But here's the interesting thing is that we do live in a particular climate that has different seasons. We've got different humidity levels, we've got different seasons. We may or may not like to keep our homes on the interior at a certain temperature, but the exterior is reacting to sun, cold, frost, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. And so that's going to create those different chemical reactions that are happening in there. Are there certain things that you're looking for in certain types of homes, whether they're detached or whether they're townhomes or whether they're older construction or newer constructions? What are some of the key things that you're looking for that might be visible to the eye that tells that when you approach a house that you're looking for? The signs in the roof, signs in the the brickwork. et
Yeah, so
cetera.
there's signs of moisture, right? So you mentioned different seasons. So there's moisture levels that are good for the summer, moisture levels that are better for the winter. So within a house envelope, you want 30 to 50% on average moisture or humidity in your home. So 30% in the winter, 50% in the summer.
Right.
So your ventilation systems should be used to create that environment. And some signs that it's not working properly are moisture, mildew in your bathroom, or water vapor on your windows that maybe ices up in the winter, that type of thing, because the moisture's hitting the cold glass. Some people think they need new windows. Maybe it's a moisture problem in your home.
And the efflorescence that you see
In the
on
basement?
walls.
Yeah,
is-
So what's
basement.
efflorescence? Let's talk about that.
Fluorescence is moisture coming out of the concrete. So it's
Sweating?
Yeah, it breathes, right? Concrete's always breathing. It's porous. So when water goes through concrete, it can bring out the chemicals of the concrete and usually leaves a white film,
Kind of a crystallizing
Yeah.
that takes place.
like
yeah.
the salts.
And that's a telltale sign that you've got excess moisture coming through.
Let's talk about basements just for a second, though. Oftentimes when you buy a new build, the basement is unfinished unless that was part of your contract. And I'm sure that can be helpful to a home inspector or even a homeowner to witness what's going on in their home. However, we've certainly seen a greater uptake in people finishing their basements, wanting more living space, or maybe wanting even to turn it into rental accommodations, et cetera. What happens for you as the inspector when you're walking into a finished basement? How does that change your job?
Usually there's spots within that finished basement that you can also see the structure. And like the furnace room, for example, is usually not finished, right? So you can see how the house was built.
Yeah.
In a finished basement, I can use tools to see behind those walls. Like it's a
Yeah.
visual inspection, but certain things can be highlighted using a thermal camera, for example, where more investigation is required. Then you bring out the moisture meter, see if there's moisture involved.
Excellent. So when we go and come back from break, actually, I think you brought some show and tell items for us. So let's just picking up where you just left off there about some of these tools that you have to be able to see what's going on in the home,
sure.
see behind the walls, etc. These are some newer, or maybe not as new as we think, tools that are available to you. When we come back from the break, we will have Phil show us what some of those tools are available to you to do the job, and also how you can educate the homeowner or the prospective homeowner on what they're buying. And I think the key word here is, as much as everything is fixable, it's when you're going to go into the transaction, as you said earlier, Mike, go in eyes wide open.
Eyes wide open, and perhaps even negotiate that price a little bit if there's things that need to be dealt with.
What he said.
Yeah.
So we're going to go to break real quick, but when we come back, we'll have more from Phil von Kaufamn, who is the owner, operator of Mike Homes Inspection, serving Simcoe County and area. Stay right with us.
Welcome back to Hitting Home with Mike and Arif, and our guest today is Phil von Kaufamn from Mike Homes Home Inspections, and we're talking about many of the great or interesting things with regards to home inspections and why this is a valuable service for people, not just when preparing to purchase a home, but even as a homeowner on going through your home ownership. And you have the talent, the knowledge, the training that makes you a good home inspector. But you also have some elements that give you superpower above anybody else, and that's some of these tools that you brought along with you, and you're going to walk us through some of them and why they're vital to the home inspection process and what they do. So take us through some of these things. I'm excited to see what you have to show us all here today.
Thanks, Mike. Well, it's not just having the tools, it's knowing how to use them, right? And I'll start off with, some of the major problems that we see in homes are electrical, for example. A lot of do-it-yourselfers out there may have wired an extra receptacle or put in a light fixture or something like that. These tools will help identify any issues. Most people are familiar with a quick down and dirty circuit tester.
Okay, and
right?
that tells us
if it's basically wired properly.
Okay.
But beyond
like
that,
polarity, I guess.
polarity, open grounds, open neutrals.
Okay,
that's
so what are
reverse
some
wiring.
of the problems we're trying to avoid in testing?
Well, everything electrical, the net effect of that could be electric shock.
okay.
Okay, so very low amperage can kill somebody. So you do not want to mess around
So
with
licking
electricity.
your finger and touching the wire is not
Not
the way to
good.
test it.
9-volt
That's
battery
right.
on the braces always works every time. It's great.
Yeah.
That'll wake you up in the morning, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's that, quick circuit. I really don't use this one.
Okay.
I use something that's a little more advanced, which is this tester. And this allows me to test, for example, GFCI receptacles.
Okay.
Everybody's familiar with that.
So ground fault circuit interrupter, go ahead.
Yeah, so they should be anywhere near water. So
Yeah.
in your bathroom, in your kitchen, around the sink area especially, in your bathroom, outside, on outside receptacles as well.
Now, one of the things actually just on GFCI, I have a little bit of familiarity with electric. There are a lot of people who think, oh, there isn't one of those test buttons right where the sink is. But as long as it's inside the...
18 inches is it, or?
Well, no,
Well, that's the
as
distance from
long
the sink,
as,
but-
as it's in line of that circuit.
Right, so one GFCI receptacle can protect everything downstream of it. Okay?
Right.
So, and a lot of people put in GFCI receptacles themselves, but they put too many of them in.
Right.
Right, and don't wire them properly. So if you
In the
trip
same
one,
circuit, yeah.
it doesn't work on the other one, and it's very hard to diagnose. But in modern homes, you'll see receptacles in bathrooms or washrooms, say on the main floor, that doesn't necessarily show a GFCI, but it's the one up in the master bedroom
Right.
bathroom that controls that one.
Yeah, and
so
this is going to tell you.
this
that
is going
we're
to
on the
tell
same
easily.
circuit. Yeah.
Easily, I can test whether GFCI is working properly or if it's defective.
Okay.
Okay.
And that, in conjunction with so many other electrical considerations, that's all part of the arsenal there. So
Exactly.
what do we got next year?
Well, this is, if I see a lot of open wires, for example, dangling in the basement or what have
Yeah.
you, I can check if they're alive or not.
Okay.
And
That versus the wet finger, yeah.
This exactly. No paper clips, no wet fingers, no tongues. Okay, this will tell me if it's live or not. There shouldn't be any exposed wiring.
Yeah.
In your house at all,
Yeah.
right?
Now, electrical shock is one thing we're trying to avoid here, but also the risk of fire is, I guess, another big
Arcing.
Arcing, and so the arc fault circuit interrupters
Yeah.
are usually in the bedrooms or the upstairs floors, and they're with a breaker in the
Yeah.
basement.
The other thing too that should be just as much a concern is you're protecting yourself, or if there is a situation, say you have a fire in your basement or whatever, the fire's out, but there's been some damage, you go to your insurance company, insurance inspector comes out. If they determine that there was some fault that may not have been revealed because they never did a home inspection, you may not be covered for those damages. So that's an important element of this too, I would think.
Oh, absolutely, and you never know what happened. You don't know the history of your house.
Yeah.
Who put in those? Like a big tell in a house is, you look at the breaker panel, and the breaker panel is manufactured by a certain company, and the breakers have to be able to be working in that panel. So
Right.
it's usually like Square D, and there's a number of other ones. So.
Yeah.
Commander and what have you, Eaton. There's so many manufacturers, and if
Right.
you look in a panel and you can see different manufacturers of breakers in that panel, there's been some
There's
work
been
done,
add-ons,
right?
yeah.
There's been add-ons.
Could be the
And one of-
father, son, or the weekend contractor.
And
or-
it could be
yeah.
totally legit approved electrical work, right?
There have been changes in the electrical industry, different brands that are going out of business or being bought out by others. Certainly during the pandemic, it was hard to find certain breakers because of shipping concerns, et cetera. But one of the things that is, I think, should be of interest, especially if you're buying a home that was built more than 10 years ago, and if it was owned by a single family or a single entity during that period, you don't have to have upgraded the certain elements. You don't have to have put by
grandfathering,
code
yeah.
the arc fault interrupter into the bedroom. But if you're going to change hands, where is the law? What is the insurance going to want? It doesn't necessarily mean don't buy the house, but it might just put a flag for you on what you need to do to operate your home safely. So maybe talk about some of the things that you find that are generationally out of date.
So, well, I don't inspect to code. Codes change, like you said, right? The code from 50 years ago is different from the code today. So GFCIs around kitchens and bathrooms wasn't a thing you needed to have, 30 years ago, for example, right? Yeah. Now you need to have them. Doesn't mean retroactively you got to bring your house up to code. You don't have to do that. What I look for in electrical is a cumulative effect. If there's a number of deficiencies, if it's one thing, it can be fixed quickly, is different than I see a number of deficiencies where you may want to get an electrician in there to do a complete inspection of your electrical systems.
Yeah. Now, with regard to code, you say you're not, that's not your primary focus, but will you point out code issues? And I'll use as an example, say someone starts putting up walls in their basement, closes in a furnace area, and doesn't leave that code-required space between the furnace and the wall. Is that something you'll flag? And
I'll flag if it's a deficiency, right?
Okay.
I don't reference specific code,
Okay.
right? So I'll say, hey, you don't have enough ventilation in your furnace room. You know, if it's a direct vent furnace, but it's venting using the air in your furnace room, right?
Right.
Instead of from outside, like in modern furnaces.
So maybe it's outside of the scope here, but where does one go if they want to know if their home is meeting all code requirements?
I'm guessing that
above
you
and
would
beyond?
flag it and they call in an HVAC person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So like general practitioner, you'll call in your heating, ventilation, and
excellent.
air conditioning guy, right? Or girl, person. So that's the electrical side. A big component of the deficiencies we find in houses or defects are
So these
electrical.
next three tools fall under what category then? Because they are all kind of related.
Right.
as you
So
pointed
so
out.
the next three coming up, I mentioned earlier, I think about drainage around your home, right? And moisture is the enemy. Like water's the enemy of
especially
any
in our
homeowner.
climate with freeze and thaw cycles.
Freeze and thaw, ice damming on the roof, that type
Yeah.
of thing. It all comes with, this is the moisture meter. You know, I can quickly find out what the moisture level is in a home. I can usually sense it when
Is
you're
that
walking into a
the
home.
air
You can tell
or
it's too humid.
surface? Is that
This
testing?
this is the air,
Right. Okay.
right? So, you know, it feels humid in here compared to another house I was in, for example. But this gives me, you know, empirical data that says, hey, it's really humid in here, right?
Yeah.
You may have a moisture issue, ventilation issue more likely, ventilation issue. So that'll come out periodically.
So Phil, in many homes, people are running humidifiers because the air feels dry and they're comfortable, their skin's itchy, et cetera. It's not necessarily scientific, it's more an emotional or a personal preference issue. You walk into a home and they are blasting all sorts of, certainly in the areas where they spend their most time, the TV room, the bedroom, wherever it may be. When people are doing that, what are some of the things, are there alternatives that people could be doing to get their skin to not feel itchy and get the moisture content right without using those devices that may or may not be helpful?
Right, well,
Mr. Dermatologist.
and you know what? I'm a subscriber to that because I have personal experience where I've lived in a house that was an 90s house, and the windows weren't the greatest. There was mold that occurred after winters, for example, that could be cleaned, but the humidity in the house wasn't where it should have been.
Right.
Moved into a newer home that has a ventilation system, has bathroom fans with timers, that type of thing, right? And the air quality in that home is so much better, and I can tell because I have asthma,
Okay.
right? So I moved from a house where I used my puffer, and in the house I'm in now, that's a newer house, I hardly ever use it.
Yeah. I think
right?
dampness and arthritis are correlate too, don't they?
I'm not quite there yet, but yeah, it's coming, I'm sure.
Yeah,
Right?
it's coming.
Yeah,
All right.
it's coming. So humidity. So some tells, and what you can do in your home is you have fans, right? If you don't have a bathroom fan, you should get one.
Yeah.
All right, and you should leave it on 30 minutes after you take a shower. Right, stuff like that you can do to help with the humidity.
And
in your
timers
house.
are cheap now.
Timers are a great ad. I put them in all my boys I have 3 boys that take showers, and they put the fan on and they leave it on all day, right? So I put in timers.
Okay, just visiting my father-in-law in Prince Edward Island, we always stay in the lower level bedroom when we visit him with the dehumidifier running constantly. That sounds like a Bell & Howell 1960s motor running it, but it's nice and quiet down there now because you just put a unit in, and I'm not sure what it is. It's a heat-cool exchange, one of those units.
Pump?
And it's a pump, yeah. They have a different name for them in different parts of Canada and that. I forget what they call them out there. But night and day difference. The moisture's gone, the smell, all the awareness of it. And those units, I think, are again, one solution that can work in conjunction with your furnace. Is that something that's being recommended, or you see
Most
more and
houses
more?
built today, or at least in our area, have ventilation systems, whole house ventilation systems, ERVs or HRVs.
Because it could all correlate too with the water table levels and where your home is built too. Yeah.
Yeah, and dehumidifiers in a basement in the summer, a great thing to have, right?
Perfect. What else have you got?
Okay,
for us
yeah,
before
getting
we
back
go
to the
break?
tools.
Yeah.
So the next one is something I'll use quite often. It's part of our packages that we offer, but I also, in any package, I'll use it if I think it's
And this
required.
is my favorite.
Yeah, this is what's called a thermal camera. So it uses infrared technology to sense different levels of temperature.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's very sensitive. So this camera can sense, like even if I just touch a surface, it'll see. I don't know if you can see.
You can't see it
your
at home,
viewers
maybe,
can see,
but you can see his fingerprints.
you can
light
see
up.
the fingerprints just by the heat transfer from my hand to the surface. So it's very sensitive.
Okay.
So I'll do a scan of an area where I think maybe there's an issue,
Exterior walls and so forth.
interior mostly, right?
Okay.
So
So
you
the
look-
interior of those exterior walls, or
Interior, the exterior walls.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Or I could use it in a bathroom, for example, inside the
okay.
house, looking for, a loose gasket in the toilet, for example.
Yeah.
And those are notorious, right, to create issues.
yeah, 'cause it's
right?
like a sponge
Right.
all around. Yeah.
Or the ceiling in your shower, and that's
Yeah.
some of the maintenance stuff we touched on earlier about
Yeah. And the
cleaning your
eye-
vents, but
Yeah,
the
the
caulking
nose,
in
the
your
ears
house.
aren't going to tell you that that issue is there, but that
Right. So this can see
superpower right
behind the walls.
Yeah.
If I see an area that, through my experience, requires more investigation, I'll bring out the moisture meter, and the moisture meter will tell me, whether it's drywall or masonry, basement floors, basement walls that are exposed. I can tell if moisture levels are higher than they should be.
Right.
Right. And that'll require further
Okay.
investigation.
Yeah.
And usually there's tells outside of the home with the drainage, right?
Yeah.
Perimeter drainage. What you see a lot are flower beds in gardens against foundation walls.
Yeah.
Like that's
Or
not a good
downspouts
idea
that
unless
are
you're totally
too short.
waterproofing the
Vapor
wall
barrier
before
and
you
wall
put
put-
your
yeah.
garden against
Yeah.
it.
So many
right?
things improper.
Downspouts that
Yeah.
are draining too close to the house. You
Yeah.
should drain them 6 feet away.
And
the
no slope.
of the property.
Yeah.
The slope that you should have is about, for our viewers, is about 1 inch for every 12 inches away from the house. So that's about a 5% slope.
Excellent. When we come back from the break, I mean, we could go on, I'm sure, forever. This is all
this is
exciting.
fun.
And this is
Yeah.
Guys with Gadgets, by the way, and anybody
love it.
who's fascinated by all this stuff. When we come back, though, we'll pick up on what are some of these instruments telling you, what are some of the findings, what are some of the recommendations or awarenesses that can be made. But we do have to go to break real quick. When we come back, we'll hear more from Home Inspector Phil von Kaufamn from Mike Homes Inspections. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Hitting Home with Mike and Arif, and we've got Phil von Kaufamn with us today, Mike Homes Inspections. And what is your tagline again, Phil?
I'm a defect recognition expert.
That's a great one.
I love it. I'm going to steal that if I can figure out how to embed
I didn't
that
come
into
up
my-
with it. I'm just using it.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
It's right up there, James Bond level, and we've covered a lot of the tools you use to reveal many of the things within a home. We've talked about what some of those things may be within a home, and we may talk a little bit more about some of them. But let's transition here to, okay, now we've found some things in the home. I'm the realtor who's often representing either the buyer or the seller in that transaction. There's some things, we've had an inspection clause in our offer here, and now we find out there's $4,000, $5,000, $10,000 worth of things that are serious issues with the home. What's typically that next phase there from your perspective?
And perhaps maybe clarify serious versus just noteworthy.
Yeah.
Right.
Because, sorry, if I can kind of qualify them, I just add, sorry to cut you off there, is just some of the things that you reveal are just make for a good to-do list and eyes wide open list going forward to be a responsible homeowner. The things to watch out to, but some of them are things that need to be dealt with right away too. Yeah.
Absolutely. So first off, my relationship is with the client, right? So the homeowner or the prospective home buyer.
Right.
That's who I'm working with. They usually share the information with the real estate agent because you're the one that has to negotiate, right?
And you'll sit down with that person who's hired you and go through that report, I guess.
I strongly recommend for that person to attend the inspection.
Right. Okay.
So to be with me, follow me around. I have my process, and I'll point out things as I see them. I don't want to be brought off track, which usually can happen when you have a homeowner or prospective buyer with you,
actually,
right?
because a lot of home inspectors don't want to have anybody along with them.
They're welcome to follow me around,
Very good.
and I'll point out things like, for example, I did an inspection yesterday where they didn't know what an HRV was or an ERV was. So I pointed out the system. I showed them how to open it, look at the filters, what to do, how to clean them, that type of thing, when to do it, that type of thing. So I have no issue doing that. I'm also a phone call away.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump in just for a second because, Mike, I think you brought up a great point by saying this actually sets you apart. I will tell you from personal experience, I had in a scenario where I was doing, making a transaction, purchasing a home, and called the inspector and said, okay, great, I want to be there. What's the date? What's the time? Et cetera, et cetera. I arrived 15 minutes early, nobody was there, only to get a message from the inspector that said, oh, my previous one canceled, I was able to get there early, I'm already done. I was like, forget it. You can keep that report. I am not paying you because, he had a 300-page binder ready to hand me and just said, give me the check. And I want to be mindful to people who are watching this. You cannot undervalue or understate the value of being there and going through it. Don't interfere, don't manipulate, don't try to adjust what the home inspector is doing, but definitely be present. It's vital. So,
and I'll spend the time at the end of the inspection addressing, like you said, there's minor things and there's things that you need to address. Nothing's not fixable. Everything can be fixed.
Yeah.
The home inspection report, like I take 400 plus pictures in a home inspection. Yeah, I don't put 400 pictures in a report. I only put in those things that are either the maintenance to-do list, fixing cracks, caulking this, caulking that, put some downspouts to drain the water 6 feet from your home, that type of thing. But I will identify some major things, like maybe your furnace is end of life or is close to end of life, it'll need replacement. Maybe you'll negotiate a better offer because you know that. Maybe the roof is near end of life, you're gonna have to replace the roof, factor in that cost. Going forward, that type of thing.
Yeah, sorry, Mike, I'm just going to jump in here one more time, and I'm going to ask you about some plain English. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. You may have done hundreds or thousands or whatever in your career home inspections, but to that homeowner, that's the only one that matters. What am I looking for in a home inspector as somebody who may be ignorant to many of those nuances, and how do I know I'm going to be able to understand the report that you produce for me?
Okay, well, so how do you pick a home inspector?
Yeah.
Talk to them first. Don't go with the first one you see in the yellow pages or on
What's the yellow pages?
Google Apps, right, whatever.
And get some recommendations from people who have
Usually your real estate agent will give you 3 names, right? I would call each one of them or do your research. It's like finding a real estate agent, right? How does somebody pick a real estate agent? Same sort of diligence should go into picking your home inspector. What are the qualifications? What's their experience? How do they do the inspection? What's the report like? All that type of thing. Are they insured?
Yeah, and in terms of remedying to the point of that's going to allow a home to close with both parties satisfied that they've covered all the bases there's 3 possible scenarios. There's the buyer walks away altogether and says there's just too many issues with this house, we just don't want to deal with them regardless of who's paying for it. The second is there's a few things and we'll have them completed. We can do an amendment to the closing that these will be done upon closing, and we'll do a second inspection to be sure that those are done prior to closing. But the third may be these issues need to be dealt with, but they're too big to get done between now and closing. So maybe there's financial compensation we can adjust. And sorry, Dave, those are the 3 scenarios that typically come up. And you play a role in some of that. After the inspection there, you may come back for a follow-up inspection. Does that occur? That
would be a completely different inspection because the inspection is for a moment in time.
Exactly.
Right? It's for those 4 hours that I'm there, or plus or minus. The homeowner or a prospective homeowner does not want a big surprise.
No.
Right? They don't want the surprise. Usually everything can be fixed, but they don't want to be surprised with something after the fact, right? After they've been at home, they financed it, they're at the top of their financing envelope. Last thing they want to do is have a major surprise come up that they have to deal with after buying that home, for example.
Right. So this does come down to fair market value. I want to buy a home. I like the location. The details of the home seem to suit my needs. What's the price I'm going to pay? What can I expect walking into a home? I'm buying a resale home. It's not going to be brand new. It's not going to be perfect. but eyes wide open, what am I willing to pay net of what improvements I need to make from a structural or safety perspective versus a personal preference perspective? These are some things that you can have. I'll go back to you for the question though. How do I know I can read the report?
Okay, so I provide the report. You know, there's going to be pictures, there's going to be circles, there's going to be little descriptions. I'm a phone call away. I can walk you through the report. I can walk you through my findings. I've usually done it on site with you prior to you receiving the report, so that you can right away start talking to your real estate agent or talking to, making a maintenance plan, prioritizing things. I'll tell you what's a priority and what's not. Right?
You will grade them at the level of severity and
the urgency.
But I don't need to be an industry expert in order to understand what you're presenting to me as a home buyer.
No, absolutely not.
Now your services, obviously I'm buying a home, I want to get that home inspection done. That's vital to me. And but there are other times when your services are just as important, just as significant to a homeowner. So tell us a little bit about when else your phone should ring from a homeowner.
Ring all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
About half my inspections are for the real estate transaction, buyers. The other half are maintenance inspections. I do a lot of those. So a homeowner who's been in a house for a while, they've not let things slide, but they haven't really focused on maintaining their home, and they would like a report for a maintenance list of what they need to do to bring their home health, to make it healthy again, right? To address any moisture issues or what have you, to find out the source of those moisture issues.
And if you're lucky, before they become bigger.
Exactly. Like I'll be called in, for example, somebody just had their new roof put on, but all of a sudden they see water, right? And the water's actually in the basement. So the roofer is saying it's the foundation leaking, right?
But it's the flashing.
And the foundation guy comes in and says, it's not the foundation, right? But the water's actually dripping down the outside of a chimney, the hot water heater chimney in the roof, dripping all the way down that through the floors, various floors, spilling over and coming out. Finally at the basement, right? And it's the flashing, and it wasn't put on correctly. And then when you get up on the roof, you see that there are other issues in the roof, and the roof wasn't done properly.
I do
so
think
now it's an insurance issue, right?
One of the takeaways, though, that we talked about offline is, a lot of home ownership and home buying can be an emotional experience when you're walking through, or even if you own the home. Careful about focusing primarily on that brand new kitchen or that reno to the bathroom when you may have some structural issues that could ruin that brand new kitchen or be costly. But let's switch over just for a minute, Mike, about some things that people don't always think about that may be silent or invisible and yet present in the home that that actually play a role in quality of life, health, et cetera, et cetera. There are some gas issues that I think you're also certified or a specialist in identifying. Maybe speak to us about some of those.
Thanks for bringing that up. So the other services we provide are, indoor air quality.
Right.
So we do air quality testing to determine there's mold spores in the house, and if it's greater than, say, a control sample that's taken outside the house. So there's mold spores in every house, right? It's whether the mold needs moisture, it needs food, and it needs the right temperature for it to grow.
Okay.
So if there's moisture in your house, that's a factor for the growth of mold. Right? If there's mold spores in your house and moisture and like drywall paper, wood, that's going to be the food. Up in the roof sheathing, whatever. That's why the mold grows there, is because it's eating the wood, right? It needs that to grow. Other than that, there's testing that we do for radon gas. So not a lot of people know about radon gas.
Not here in Canada, more so in the States for some reason.
Yeah, I actually have a brother-in-law that has a radon mitigation system in his basement in Michigan, Michigan, United States. But it's 7% of houses in Canada have a radon level that's above Health Canada's recommended
what is it,
level.
and why is it a concern?
What is it? It's a naturally occurring radioactive gas from the decay of uranium in the soil.
Which is in most soil.
Uranium's everywhere, right?
Yeah.
The issue with radon gas, if it becomes concentrated, like in a basement, for example, or your home office is down there in the basement, concentrations over a certain level, 200 becquerels per meter squared, to be scientific about it, but can cause lung cancer.
Wow.
Okay, so if you breathe in radon gas, the offshoots of radon gas, it can damage the cells in your lungs, and damaged cells can become cancerous.
Yeah. So in addition to a home inspection, a radon inspection is a good.
Well, the thing with radon gas is your neighbor could have low levels of radon gas, but your house could have high levels because maybe the penetrations into your basement there's cracks, or where the plumbing goes in through the foundation floor, or your sump pumps not sealed or covered. Radon gas can come up through the soil and be concentrated in the lower levels, usually in your house.
That's the interesting thing about gas. If there's a way in, it will find it. So we do have to go to break. Time is flying. I'm having so much fun. I don't know about you.
Yeah,
we're
quite interesting.
Definitely engaging. When we come back from the break, we've covered lots of ground. Things that are obvious, things that are not so obvious. What's behind the walls? How do we identify it? Take a break. Come on down. Get off the emotional. Things are fixable for the most part, but giving you the information you need to make a decision on whether you want to go through with that transaction. But when we come back from the break, let's touch on some of the more interesting things you found during your time as an inspector. I'm sure there are some great stories you will not want to miss. We'll be right back with more from Phil von Kaufamn of Mike Homes Inspections right after this break. Welcome back to Hitting Home with Mike and Arif, and awesome conversation with you, Phil von Kaufamn, Mike Homes Inspections. Glad to have you on the show. We've covered a lot of ground, covered a lot of things to put some minds at ease and understand owning a home, and also put a little more emphasis on the importance of quality of life, air quality, all those things about home ownership. Truth of the matter is, though, that as a seller, I might have a different opinion about how great my house is compared to what a buyer or an inspector may see. And along your journey, I'm sure you've seen some really interesting things. Take us down a bit of that journey with you.
I'll try to share some things that I can share. I don't want to put people to shame.
You don't have
right?
to mention names.
Right. So yeah, I mean, people have $1 million houses, right? They're looking at it and trying to sell, and there's one house that was in that category of a couple $1 million, but they didn't know that there was cedar shakes missing on the roof. So that's the first thing I saw on the outside. So I thought, okay, well, obviously there's some sort of pest involvement here.
Okay.
That's why we leave the attic inspection to the end, right? Because we don't want to be incapacitated before the rest of the inspection is done. Let's put it that way. So, lifting that attic lid is probably the moment of truth in an inspection, because for some reason animals like to use that lid top as their personal bathroom. Right? So for some reason everything congregates there. So the first tell when you open the lid is
keep it level.
What's that odor? Yeah, keep it level.
Keep it level.
But there could be spillage from the side, right? So the smell was just overwhelming. A fresh deposit right at face level when you're coming into the attic, like right there, right? And okay, there's obviously a live, there's a situation here where you have a current inhabitant of your attic. And
who are these typical tenants in an attic?
So flashlight comes out, and then there's, like you're camping around the campfire, and you see the raccoon eyes in the distance, and sure enough, mother raccoon, I'm not sure there was her baby's up there, but mother raccoon, big one too, right? So
wow.
Could have been pre-birth, but coming face to face with a raccoon up in an attic is not the best. And
not when you're at eye level, no.
No, not. And then there's a hole in the roof too now, right? So just because water, and they didn't even notice there's any leakage, so it's probably pretty recent that hole was made, but. Any water coming in doesn't necessarily mean the water's going to be leaking at that spot. It could travel along the vapor barrier, which is plastic in your ceiling, and come out somewhere else, right? Yeah. But obviously needed to be addressed. They actually negotiated a better price because it needed and remediation in that attic.
Yeah, and with your inspection, it wasn't a matter of just going, oh, there's a hole there, we'll fix that before closing. Now you've closed whatever has caused that hole or taken advantage of that hole into the attic, which is not a good thing either.
So what other ancillary issues
so you want to get the pest control.
You want to call the pest control services, because that insulation probably all have to be taken out.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the only way to do it. You got to remediate, take all the insulation out, has to be all newly insulated, right? Cleaned, obviously. Anything that's in the attic has to be cleaned, and obviously fixing the roof.
So how often would you suggest people take a peek into their attics over time, and what should they look for?
I would say inspecting your roof from the outside, you can do like every day. You know, when you're driving by your house, when you're walking the dog, you know, you're looking up at your roof. Anything changed? You know, it was pretty windy that last night, or the storm or whatever. Any shingles missing, that type of thing. So you can obviously inspect your roof all the time.
Right.
But going up in your attic probably doesn't happen very often, right? Once you've done the initial, okay, how much insulation is up there? That's the big tell. But I would go up there, sure. Go up there, once every 5 years or so, because the wind can blow the insulation and clog your soffit. So the ventilation.
The more vents get plugged with insulation.
Rodents are not uncommon. Even though we live in an urban center, I mean, it is common to have squirrels and rats and raccoons, etc.
They were here before us.
They were here before us. But the other thing is that we're also changing seasons. It's getting a little bit cooler, and they're going to be looking for a place to nest. Right. So I'm sure there's other tells around soffits and just ways that they're looking to lift. I mean, they're pretty handy.
Well, the first thing to do is not have any large trees beside your house. Right, or overhanging branches. I mean, they have a way in.
Yeah.
The roof we're talking about, but mice. I mean, mice can get into very small holes, right?
Yeah.
And signs of mice are usually found in certain areas, whether the basement or the attic.
So those chocolate sprinkles that are all over the place.
Exactly, right. And you can see the mouse holes actually as they travel through your insulation if it's compacted insulation. Brings up another point: insulation. Today's standard is about R50 in your attic, which is about 18 inches of blown-in fiberglass, for example.
Yeah.
And I've been in attics where it's very minimal. I've been in attics where they've put insulation on top of vermiculite to hide it or whatever, just to add it. And so we do a complete, we go down in to see where the vapor barrier is, what levels are, what types of insulation. We do a full assessment on that as well.
Let's say, in terms of those anecdotes and that, and again, a lot of the MacGyver type projects, do-it-yourself stuff. What's the biggest thing you've either ever heard of from another inspector or something else, or maybe experienced firsthand?
Well, do-it-yourself stuff, especially like renovations in the basement where they're knocking through structural load-bearing walls and putting a piece of wood as their new header. You know what I mean? Supporting 2 stories above it with a piece of wood.
So they can have the open concept basement.
So they can, or put a new entrance in or something like that.
I'll just point this out, tragic scenario that happened in about 3 years ago. I believe it was during sort of the pandemic period, but those homes along Yonge Street that have all sort of been bought up for future development, that was exactly one of those scenarios. A gentleman went in, elderly gentleman went into his own home, and he'd done some changes to it, and the house actually did collapse on him, and he's deceased because of it. So, saving a buck is great, and feeling
dollars.
handy, and thinking that you can go to a big box store where they're going to walk you through it is great, but there may be more to it than YouTube.
I saw it on YouTube, yes.
Yeah, exactly. So,
exactly. I mean, stuff like that when the basement entrances too are more often than not done correctly.
Right.
When they're dug out and put in a new like a walkout, stairs. Somebody wants to rent out their basement, they're going to put an entrance in, and more often than not, they're not done correctly with the proper drainage, with the proper, you want a 4-inch step up at least into your home. A lot of those. That's a big thing too. When people build decks, right? They build the surface of the deck, so they walk out right onto the deck. You should have a step down 4 to 6 inches. You don't want that moisture, snow, or whatever coming in through the threshold.
You're doing everything to code, not just to appease the municipality, but I mean, there's a reason that code exists, and typically it's scenarios like the one you just spoke about of the elderly gentleman that have to happen before there is a change or an update to the code to protect people against that. It's good.
I think though, Mike, when you want to put this in general terms that everybody can relate to, everybody can understand, we all drive down our city roads. We talked about earlier, we live in a city in a climate that has 4 seasons, or including construction and traffic and all that stuff. But we see these little cracks in the road that eventually become potholes. And what ends up happening is, and it makes a lot of sense on the roads, it transfers over to the home, but the moisture gets in there and then it freezes and it expands and it pops across the road. The same thing's going to happen with your brick. The same thing's going to happen as the house shifts a little bit. Certainly when new windows have gone in and the house settles a little bit, you get sort of, what is that, the silicone seal that's pulled away, and water and moisture and dirt gets in there. These are things that are general maintenance issues that are relatively cheap. They just require time, but if left unattended can amount to much more. What seeps in and gets behind between the brick veneer and the house. So more common than not, are you finding that people sort of find themselves overwhelmed, or are you finding that people are walking away with a greater understanding and ready to move forward? What are you seeing?
I think it depends. Like, everybody has their own tolerance level of what's acceptable or not, or what's scary to them or not, right? The veneer, you mentioned the brick veneer, like cracks in brick veneer are common, right? Especially on the corners of windows traveling up. Like you said, it's veneer, right? It's not structural, but you don't want water seeping in and causing more damage.
Well, we got a couple of minutes left, but a few quick tips for anybody. You've just bought that home. What are some of the things you should be doing annually, semi-annually, looking out for, just to give you peace of mind that your house is in good shape?
Sealing from the elements, outside. A lot of people are remiss on keeping their caulking. Like, that's an annual inspection item. You should make sure your caulking's good. All the drainage around your house, especially, is important. Your roof system should be an annual inspection as well.
I'll throw this out there for the person or the family that has looked to real estate as part of their investment portfolio, and they've got a second home that they're renting out. We oftentimes don't get a lot of access to the home. What is advice for a landlord or a property owner that has a tenant and is mindful of that relationship, of how frequently they can access the home and the property?
Sorry, what's the question?
Being able to go and look out for the home.
Yeah. I mean, you need access to it. If it's your property, you've got to make sure it's maintained, right?
It's your right as a landlord,
But I do think that, again, to the audience, we need to know what our rights are. We need to know what our rights are not. And we need to understand the law, but at the end of the day, you do have to protect that investment. Certainly a tenant would expect that their home is in good condition.
I would hope so.
They've got to expect that the
usually
person
it's the other way around. It's the tenant trying to get the landlord to do something, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
True.
Right.
And I know you have some good advice further to what we've discussed here today, available on your website. Now, what is your website?
Well, you can go to MikeHomesInspections.com. I have a Facebook site of my own where I'll post great articles, educational articles for the homeowners.
Search your name and you'll pop up.
Mike Homes Inspections, Simcoe County, and my Facebook page will pop up. And the great educational items. Mike Homes group does
Lots
a great
of videos
job
in there, and
on how to maintain your home, proper system, care, all that type of thing.
I think the takeaway, though, Mike, today, I'm sure you'll agree, yes, it's part of the transaction, a home inspection absolutely must be part of the transaction, the condition, especially if you're in competitive times. My personal opinion, I don't know about you as a realtor, don't fall for it. If the seller's not willing to allow inspection, I'd take that as a flag myself. But there's more to an inspection beyond the transaction. It's also during home ownership. We got to go, Mike.
We do.
Phil, this has been awesome. Mike Homes Inspections, thanks for joining us on Hitting Home.
Thank you very much.
All the best.
Enlightening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.